The street was quiet until the gunshots shattered the silence. When cops kill a little boy's police dog, unaware his father is the most lethal Delta Force commander ever. Then little boy screamed, his tiny hands trembling. His German shepherd, a retired police K9 named Thunder, lay motionless on the ground, his once proud body now covered in blood. He dropped to his knees beside him, his trembling hands pressed against his fur. "Please wake up," he whispered. "You didn't do anything wrong." Two officers stood frozen, smoke still curling from their pistols. They thought they'd stopped a threat. "You didn't have to shoot," he cried. "He was just trying to protect me." The officers looked at each other, panic rising, their faces pale. "We thought he was attacking." One stammered, lowering his gun. But the truth was already too late. What they didn't know, what would change everything, was who his father really was. Thousands of miles away, deep in a classified Delta Force training compound, a man received a call that would awaken a part of him the world had long forgotten. His name, Commander Ryan Harlan, former Special Forces legend, codename Ghost. And when he heard his son's tear-filled voice whisper, "Daddy!" They killed Max. Something inside him broke. Moments later, from the end of the street, a black SUV screeched to a halt. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out, eyes cold, movements calculated, the kind of presence that silenced everyone around him. He knelt beside the little boy, brushed his hair back gently, then looked up at the officers. "You just killed my dog," he said, "and you have no idea who I am?" He straightened slowly. "You just declared war on the wrong man. Stay till the end, because what this father does next will leave you speechless. Before we start, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel." The sun had barely risen when the sleepy suburban neighborhood began to stir. Birds sang from the trees. Sprinklers hissed across neatly trimmed lawns, and somewhere down Oak Ridge Drive, a little boy's laughter echoed softly. 7-year-old Ethan Harlan skipped down the front steps of his home, his blue backpack bouncing with each hop. Beside him trotted a massive German shepherd, his coat gleaming like burnished gold in the morning light. His name was Thunder, a retired police K9 who once served in the city's most dangerous unit. His badge was gone, but his loyalty remained unshaken. "Come on, Thunder," Ethan giggled, clutching his lunchbox. The dog barked once, tail wagging, keeping perfect step with his small strides. Every morning the two made the same short walk to school. And every morning the neighbors paused a smile. They were inseparable, the fearless protector, and the little boy who'd become his whole world. Across the street, Mrs. Thompson watered her flowers. "Morning, Ethan. Morning, Thunder." "Morning." Ethan waved brightly. Thunder gave a low, polite woof. But today, something was different. Thunder's ears twitched. His eyes flicked toward the end of the street, sharp, alert, scanning. His trained instincts had never truly faded. A delivery van sat idling longer than usual. A man leaned against it, watching just a bit too closely. Ethan didn't notice. He hummed a tune from his favorite cartoon, unaware that Thunder had shifted slightly in front of him, blocking his path for a brief moment before letting him continue. "Good boy," he said, patting his neck, thinking he was just being playful, but his low growl vibrated beneath his tiny hand. They turned the corner, passing the old park fence. A jogger waved. Thunder's gaze followed until the man disappeared. Every movement, every sound, he catalogued it all. Somewhere deep in that soldier's mind, something didn't feel right. When they reached the school gate, Ethan knelt beside him and hugged his thick fur. "You wait here, okay? I'll be back after class." Thunder sat calm but watchful as he ran off. His amber eyes followed him until he vanished inside. The wind shifted. A faint metallic scent, foreign sharp, reached his nose. His muscles stiffened. Something was coming, and by sunset, this quiet street would never be the same again. It started with a single call. A neighbor reporting a large dog acting aggressive near the park. The dispatcher barely finished reading the note before two patrol officers, Officer Harris and Officer Grant, acknowledged the alert. It sounded routine. Just another complaint about a dog off-leash. They arrived minutes later, their cruiser tires crunching over the gravel road. Kids played in the distance, their laughter mixing with the faint sound of barking. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary until they spotted a German shepherd standing stiffly in the middle of the street. Growling low at someone behind a parked van. "Eyes on that shepherd," Harris said, stepping out of the car, hand instinctively on his weapon. "Could be the one," Grant squinted. "There's a kid nearby." Indeed, just a few feet away, Ethan stood frozen, clutching his backpack. Thunder stood protectively in front of him, teeth bared, not at him, but at the man crouched behind the van. The man's hands were trembling, shoving something metallic into a duffel bag. Thunder barked sharply, lunging forward a few inches. The sound shattered the stillness. The man panicked, dropped the bag, and sprinted away down the alley. But the officers didn't see him clearly. They only saw the sudden movement, the barking, the child's frightened cry. "Gun! The dog's attacking the boy," Harris shouted. But Grant hesitated. "Wait!" But it was too late. A deafening shot rang out, echoing across the park. Ethan screamed. Thunder staggered, his powerful frame collapsing onto the concrete. A dark stain spread quickly beneath him. For a second, there was silence. Then chaos. The officers froze in disbelief, adrenaline crashing into guilt. Grant rushed forward, his voice trembling. "Oh my God, the boy! Is he hurt?" Ethan dropped to his knees, wrapping his arms around Thunder's neck. "No, no, Thunder! Wake up!" he sobbed. The dog let out a soft whine, trying to lift his head, eyes filled with pain, but still searching for his face. Neighbors rushed out from their homes. Someone shouted. They shot the dog. Phones came up. Cameras clicked. The officers tried to explain, but no one listened. He was attacking. Harris stammered, his voice breaking, but the crowd's anger was louder. Ethan's small hands trembled as he pressed against the wound, his tears falling on Thunder's fur. "He was saving me," he whispered through sobs. Thunder's breathing grew shallow. His tail thumped weakly once, as if trying to comfort him one last time, and then stillness. Grant looked away, sick to his stomach. Harris's hands shook around his gun. "We didn't know," he muttered almost to himself. But the camera phones were still rolling. The world had already chosen its side. A father's world was about to collapse, and a storm of justice was only beginning to, as the entire neighborhood stood still. The sound of Ethan's cries echoing through the street like something torn straight from a nightmare. Sirens blared in the distance, growing louder with every second. But to Ethan, the world had gone silent except for the faint, uneven breaths of the dog lying in his arms. "Please," he whispered, shaking him gently. "You have to wake up." But Thunder didn't move. His eyes fluttered. His chest rose one last time, then still-edled completely. The weight of that silence crushed him. Neighbors rushed forward, shouting at the officers. He wasn't attacking him. "That dog saved that child. You didn't even check." The voices collided in a storm of outrage. A woman filmed the scene, her voice trembling. "This is going online," she said. Officer Harris stepped back, pale and sweating. "It was self-defense," he muttered weakly. Grant's jaw clenched. "You shot too soon," he whispered, guilt already settling in. Ethan pressed his face into Thunder's fur, sobbing so hard his tiny body shook. Blood stained his hands and the hem of his blue shirt. "He was trying to protect me," he choked out between breaths. "He was my best friend." The first backup units arrived, sirens flashing red and blue across the quiet houses. Paramedics approached, but Ethan screamed when one of them tried to pull him away. "Don't touch him. He's my dog." An officer crouched beside him, voice gentle. "Sweetheart, we need to help him." "You already heard him," he yelled, his voice breaking with pure heartbreak. Grant turned away, unable to meet his eyes. His radio crackled. Someone from dispatch asking for a status report, but he couldn't bring himself to answer. The paramedics finally lifted Thunder's body onto a stretcher, wrapping it carefully, but Ethan refused to let go until one of them promised. "We'll take care of him, I swear." Only then did he release his paw, his hand trembling like a leaf in the wind. As the ambulance pulled away, the street was flooded with flashing lights, officers, and anger. Neighbors shouted for justice, recording everything. Harris stood frozen, his weapon lowered, staring at the blood stain on the pavement. He knew deep down something had gone horribly wrong, and it wouldn't stay buried for long. Because somewhere, miles away, a man was about to get a phone call that would turn grief into fury, and fury into vengeance. The sound of tires screeching against asphalt shattered the tense silence. A black SUV swerved to a halt in front of the flashing police lights. Its door flew open before the engine even stopped. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a plain black t-shirt and cargo pants. His face was calm, but there was something in his eyes that made even the armed officers instinctively take a step back. Ryan Harlan had arrived. He didn't need to ask where his son was. The moment he saw the small figure kneeling on the pavement beside a bloodstain, everything else around him faded away. "Ethan," his voice cracked as he ran forward. The little boy looked up, his tear-streaked face pale. "Daddy," he cried, running into his arms. His tiny hands were covered in blood. Ryan froze. For a moment, his combat-hardened mind couldn't process what he was seeing. His son's trembling shoulders, the stretcher being loaded into the ambulance. The two police officers standing nearby, faces pale with guilt. He crouched down to Ethan's level, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "Sweetheart, what happened?" "They shot him," he whispered, his voice breaking. "They shot Thunder. He was trying to protect me." Ryan's throat tightened. He looked toward the ambulance, the black bag, the paramedics' somber faces, and his jaw clenched. Years of battlefield discipline kept him still, but his eyes burned with something deeper than rage. He stood slowly, turning toward the officers. The air seemed to grow heavier. "Who fired?" Officer Harris swallowed hard. "It was an accident." "We thought you thought wrong," Ryan said quietly. The calmness in his tone was more terrifying than any shout could have been. One of the sergeants approached, trying to defuse the situation. "Sir, I understand you're upset, but we'll conduct a full investigation." Ryan's gaze snapped to him. "Investigation?" he repeated. "My 7-year-old watched his best friend die in his arms. There's nothing to investigate. You killed a hero." The sergeant opened his mouth to reply, but no words came. Ryan turned back to his son. His small fingers clung to his sleeve, and when he lifted him into his arms, his sobs quieted into soft hiccups. He carried him to the SUV, pausing only once to look back at the blood-stained street. His eyes swept over the two officers, memorizing their faces with the precision of a man trained to remember targets. "Daddy," Ethan whispered weakly, "is Thunder going to be okay?" Ryan didn't answer. He looked up at the sky, his expression unreadable. Then he whispered to himself, words no one else could hear. "I'll find the truth. I promise. And when a soldier makes a promise, the world learns what it costs to break it." The next morning, the world moved on, but Ryan Harlan didn't. The house was unnaturally quiet. Ethan sat curled on the couch, clutching Thunder's worn leather collar against his chest. The faint jingling of the dog tag was the only sound in the room. He hadn't spoken since last night. Every few minutes, his small fingers brushed the tag, as if he could still feel his protector's heartbeat through it. Ryan stood by the window, unmoving. He'd been awake all night, staring out into the empty street. The calm mask on his face hid the storm underneath. In the military, they used to call him the Ghost, because when he went silent, people disappeared. But now that silence had returned, and it was colder than ever. On the coffee table lay the official report. Incident involving aggressive animal. Officers acted in self-defense. Ryan's jaw tightened as he read it. There was no mention of the man Thunder had been barking at. No note of the fleeing suspect. Just a sanitized story meant to bury the truth. He took a deep breath, forcing down the anger clawing at his chest. Fury wouldn't bring Thunder back. Precision would. He crossed the room, knelt beside Ethan, and gently lifted the collar from his trembling hands. "He was brave," he said softly. "And he was right. I need you to be brave too." "Okay." Ethan nodded, tears streaming silently. Ryan kissed the top of his head, then stood. His voice was steady, but there was something lethal beneath it. The tone of a man who'd once commanded operations in places that didn't exist on maps. He picked up his phone, dialing a number few people in the world had. "It's Harlan," he said quietly. "I need a favor. I need access to civilian incident footage. Full coverage of Oak Ridge Drive. Timestamp 1430 hours, and I need it now." A pause, then a voice on the other end. "Understood. Sending it through secure line." Ryan ended the call and looked once more at the blood-stained collar. "They think this is over," he murmured. "They have no idea who they just hurt." The silence returned, heavy, controlled, and dangerous, because when Ryan Harlan went quiet, it meant someone was about to pay. By the time dawn broke the next day, Ryan Harlan was already deep in motion. He hadn't slept. The hum of his laptop filled the small living room, the glow from the screen reflecting off his hardened face. His fingers moved with precision, typing commands, opening secured networks that most civilians didn't even know existed. On the table beside him lay a stack of printed reports, police statements, dispatch logs, and a blurry photo from a bystander's phone showing a man fleeing behind the van, just moments before the shot was fired. It was the single detail the department had conveniently omitted. He zoomed in on the image. The man's hand held something metallic, not a weapon, something smaller, cylindrical, with a faint red wire visible in the reflection. Ryan's stomach turned cold. He'd seen that kind of setup before. He'd known on the battlefield. Improvised explosive triggers. "Thunder," he murmured under his breath. "You weren't protecting him from them. You were protecting him from him." He clicked another window. A familiar voice came through a secure line. "Harlan, you back in the game, brother?" "Not by choice," Ryan replied flatly. "I need traffic cam footage from Oak Ridge, 1400 to 1500 hours. Priority 1, don't route through city servers and they're compromised." The voice hesitated. "You think there's a cover-up?" "I don't think," Ryan said, eyes narrowing. "I know." Minutes later, encrypted files began to stream onto his screen. One by one, camera angles from intersections and stores near the park appeared. He played them simultaneously, our frame by frame. And there it was, a black van parked 3 blocks away, a man getting out with a duffel bag, Thunder appearing in frame, barking, pulling Ethan back just before the man moved. Then the officer's cruiser arriving, blocking the camera view. And seconds later, the muzzle flash. Ryan's hand clenched into a fist. "He was right on him," he whispered, "and they shot the only one who saw it." He uploaded the stills into a separate encrypted drive, tagging them by timestamp. His military instincts were in full control now, calm, efficient, deadly focused. At that moment, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You're asking the wrong questions, Commander. Walk away." Ryan stared at the message for a long second. Then he exhaled slowly, the faintest smirk forming on his lips. "Wrong move," he muttered. He deleted the message, locked the laptop, and grabbed his jacket. Before walking out, he glanced toward the hallway where Ethan slept, clutching Thunder's old collar. "This isn't about revenge anymore," he whispered. "It's about truth." Then he stepped into the cold morning air. A soldier without orders, hunting not for blood, but for justice. And somewhere in the city shadows, the people who killed his dog were about to learn that Ryan Harlan didn't forgive, and he never forgot. 2 nights later, the rain came hard, the kind that turned streets into rivers and memories into ghosts. Ryan Harlan sat in the dim light of his garage, the scent of gun oil and damp earth mixing in the air. On the workbench lay a sealed evidence bag, Thunder's vest still stained with dried blood. He stared at it for a long time before finally unzipping the bag. His fingers brushed over the K9 patch, torn and darkened. Every mark told a story, but one stain stood out. It was on the lower strap, smeared in a direction that didn't make sense. Thunder's wound had been on the shoulder. This stain was from something or someone else. Ryan's instincts sharpened. He carefully cut out a small swab of the blood and placed it into a sterile vial. Then he picked up his phone. "Dr. Sarah Mitchell," he said when the call connected. "It's Ryan. I need a rush forensic test." "Human DNA. Don't ask why, Ryan," her voice replied cautiously. "You're not in the field anymore." "What's going on?" He paused. "Just do this for me, please." Within hours, she met him at her private clinic. The hum of lab equipment filled the silence as she placed the sample under the analyzer. Ryan paced behind her, every tick of the machine echoing like a heartbeat. Finally, the monitor beeped. Sarah's brows furrowed. "This isn't your dog's blood," she said slowly. "It's human." Ryan stopped pacing. "Human? Yes, male." And she hesitated, pulling up the database match. "He's in the system flagged by Homeland Security." Ryan leaned over the monitor. The photo that appeared made his stomach twist. A known fugitive linked to multiple bombings overseas. The same man he'd seen behind the van in the footage. Thunder hadn't been aggressive that day. He'd been tracking a terrorist. Ryan closed his eyes, the truth washing over him like a knife's edge. He saved him. He whispered. He knew. Sarah looked at him with quiet awe. "Your dog might have prevented something catastrophic, Ryan." He nodded slowly, eyes dark with resolve. "And no one will ever know unless I make them." He grabbed the report, his voice dropping into that low, measured tone his enemies once feared. "They called it a mistake," he said. But it wasn't a mistake. It was a cover-up. As thunder rolled outside, Ryan walked into the storm. A father with proof, a soldier with purpose, and a man about to expose the truth behind his best friend's death. By the end of the week, the story had exploded. The video of a little boy screaming over his dying dog was everywhere. News broadcasts, social media feeds, and morning talk shows. Headlines screamed across screens. Police shoot retired K9 in front of child. Hero dog or aggressive animal? The internet decides. Millions watched in outrage. Millions more demanded justice. The image of Ethan clutching Thunder's lifeless body had become a symbol of innocence, betrayal, and loss. Hashtags trended across platforms. Candlelight vigils appeared outside police stations. The world was angry. But Ryan Harlan stayed silent. He didn't post. He didn't comment. He didn't go on TV. Instead, while the world argued, Ryan was buried in his investigation, moving through the city's underbelly, gathering files, tracking down surveillance records, and quietly tracing the man Thunder had died chasing. Every time a news anchor said tragedy, he whispered under his breath, "Heroism." At night, he'd sit beside Ethan's bed as he slept, holding Thunder's medal in his palm. His soft breathing reminded him why he couldn't stop. The department could hide evidence. They could twist the truth, but they couldn't erase what Thunder had done. Outside, the police chief held a press conference. "Our officers followed procedure," he told the reporters. "It was an unfortunate event, but no laws were broken." Ryan watched the broadcast from a distance. His jaw tightened. "No laws," he muttered. "Just morals." The next moment, his phone buzzed. A message from one of his old Delta teammates. "You're trending, Commander. People want you to speak," he typed a reply. "Not yet. Truth first, noise later." Then he opened the encrypted drive and stared at the photos of the fugitive's face. The same man whose blood had been on Thunder's vest. Somewhere out there, that man was still walking free. And Ryan wasn't about to let that stand. The world might have moved on to outrage and hashtags, but Ryan wasn't seeking attention. He was seeking justice. And while the cameras pointed at the police department, Ryan Harlan was already in the shadows, hunting the real killer. The city was asleep when Ryan Harlan made his move. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and silent, the kind of silence he'd learned to operate in years ago, when missions were measured not in minutes, but in heartbeats. He parked 2 blocks from an abandoned storage facility on the outskirts of town. The address traced from a receipt found in the fugitive's duffel bag. Every instinct told him this was the place. He slipped on gloves, checked his pistol, and moved through the shadows with surgical precision. Inside, the air rire of fuel and metal. Broken crates lined the walls. On one table, maps of the city were spread out. Circled locations marked routes. His eyes narrowed as he leaned closer. The red circle around Oak Ridge Elementary School made his blood run cold. That was Ethan's school. He turned on a small flashlight and saw something else. A half-assembled device wired to a detonator. "Crude but deadly row," he whispered, realization hitting like a hammer. The dog had picked up the scent days before the attack. He hadn't been barking at random. He had been trying to stop this. Ryan's breath slowed, his soldier's discipline kicking in. He photographed everything. The explosives, the blueprints, the vehicle registration tags, all evidence of a plan to target innocent lives. Then he found the security camera mounted in the corner, dust-covered but still recording. He popped the drive and slipped it into his pocket. Back in his SUV, he connected the footage to his laptop. The grainy video showed the fugitive working in the facility, and then a visitor and a man in uniform. Ryan leaned closer. The badge was clear. "A police officer, son of a—" he growled. The truth snapped into focus. The shooting wasn't a mistake. It was a cover-up to silence the dog that had discovered the connection. Thunder hadn't died protecting Ethan from danger. He died exposing corruption. Ryan's pulse pounded in his ears. "They killed him to keep it quiet," he said, voice low and trembling with contained rage. He replayed the footage, freezing on the officer's face. It was Harris, the same man who had fired the shot. But it wasn't fear in Harris's eyes that day. It had been recognition. The betrayal cut deep. Ryan closed the laptop, his reflection staring back at him in the dark window. A father, a soldier, and now a man with proof. He whispered, "You were right, boy. You always were." Outside, The first hint of dawn began to creep across the horizon. Somewhere in that pale light, Ryan Harlan made a vow, not out of vengeance, but out of loyalty. They had taken his friend. Now he would take their lies apart, piece by piece. By the time the sun rose, Ryan Harlan had already made his decision. No lawyers, no press, no warnings, just the truth. Delivered face to face. He walked into the precinct like a ghost returning to the battlefield. Calm, deliberate, unstoppable. Every officer in the lobby turned to stare. They all knew who he was by now. The grieving father, the war hero, the man whose silence spoke louder than any news headline. Ryan went straight to the duty desk. "I'm here for Officer Harris," he said. His voice was quiet, too quiet, the kind of tone that carried danger. Harris appeared minutes later, pale and uneasy. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Commander Harlan," he started. "Listen, Ryan cut him off. No excuses." He placed a small USB drive on the table between them. "Play it." The room fell silent as the footage began. The fugitive in the storage facility, the explosives, and finally the damning frame showing Harris entering the warehouse. The other officers watched, stunned, Harris's face drained of color. I didn't know he'd record it," he whispered. Ryan's jaw tightened. "You didn't know Thunder would find him either, did you?" The chief stepped forward. "Harlan, we can handle this internally." "Internally?" Ryan's eyes locked onto him, cold as steel. "You already did that. You buried evidence. You let the world call my dog a threat when he was saving your city." No one moved. Even the air seemed afraid to shift. Harris's hands trembled. He told me it was just an exchange intel for money. When Thunder started barking, I panicked. I didn't mean Ryan slammed his hand against the table. The sound cracked like thunder. "You didn't mean to cover up a terrorist network. You didn't mean to shoot a hero." The officer flinched, eyes glistening. "I'm sorry." Ryan took a step closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "You're going to be more than sorry. You're going to confess publicly on record. Every name, every lie, every file, or I'll make sure the world hears it from me." Harris nodded, broken. Ryan straightened, his tone calm again. "Good. Then maybe Thunder's death will finally mean something." As he turned to leave, the entire precinct stood frozen. Not by rank, but by respect, because they all knew what they had just witnessed wasn't vengeance. It was justice. For days, the city buzzed with whispers. The footage had leaked, not through the police department, but through Ryan Harlan himself. Every news channel replayed the evidence: the fugitive's workshop, the explosives, the officers' secret meeting. The truth was out, and it hit the nation like a thunderclap. Thunder, the dog once labeled aggressive, was now hailed as a hero who had stopped a terror attack before it began. Crowds gathered outside the Harlan home, leaving flowers, flags, and dog collars on the gate. But Ryan didn't celebrate. He wasn't interested in fame or sympathy. He spent his night sitting by the fireplace, staring at the folded K9 vest on the table, the one Thunder had worn on his final day. A knock came at the door. It was the police chief, hat in hand. "Commander Harlan," he said quietly, "the department owes you and your son an apology. What happened should never have happened." Ryan studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "It's not me you owe," he said. "It's him." The chief's voice wavered. "We're arranging a full military funeral. Honors, flag detail, everything. He deserves it." Ryan exhaled slowly, eyes glinting in the firelight. "He doesn't need a funeral," he murmured. "He needs remembrance." That night, Ryan drove out to the old police training grounds, Thunder's second home. He walked the empty field, the rain soaking his jacket, and knelt in the mud where Thunder used to run drills. He whispered, "You found the truth, boy. I just made sure the world heard it." Behind him, the faint glow of headlights appeared. Ethan stepped out, holding a small lantern. "Daddy," he said softly, "can we tell people what Thunder did?" Ryan smiled faintly, lifting him into his arms. "We already did." The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment it felt like the sound of paws running through the grass again, a hero returning home. The truth was no longer hidden, and in the silence of that field, Ryan Harlan finally allowed himself to breathe. A week later, the morning sun spilled across the Harlan porch as the mail truck pulled up. The driver handed Ryan a thick, cream-colored envelope, sealed with a golden crest. The handwriting on the front was bold and unmistakable. The White House. Ryan turned it over slowly, his military instinct stirring even before he opened it. Inside was a formal letter on crisp parchment, embossed with the presidential seal. He unfolded it carefully, reading every word aloud, his voice steady, though his throat tightened with every sentence. "Commander Ryan Harlan, in recognition of extraordinary service and sacrifice, the United States honors your K-9 companion, Thunder, with the Medal of Valor. His actions directly prevented a terrorist attack, saving countless innocent lives. His courage reflects the highest ideals of duty, loyalty, and love. On behalf of a grateful nation, thank you, the President of the United States." Ryan's fingers trembled slightly as he lowered the letter. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he glanced toward the living room where Ethan was drawing at the table. "Hey, sweetheart," he called softly. "Come here a second." He skipped over, curious. "What's that?" He knelt down to his level, showing him the metal enclosed in the envelope, gold shining and heavy with meaning. "It's for Thunder," he said quietly. "The president wanted to say thank you." Ethan's eyes widened, tears pooling instantly. "Can we show him?" Ryan smiled faintly, brushing a tear from his cheek. "We will. Every time someone remembers his story, he'll see it." Later that day, the letter and metal were placed inside a glass frame on the mantel beside Thunder's collar and photo. The sunlight hit it just right, making the metal gleam like a living flame. Ryan stood there for a while, silent, one hand resting on the frame. "You did it, buddy," he murmured. "You saved them all." Outside, the flag in their yard fluttered softly in the wind. For the first time since that terrible day, Ryan Harlan felt peace. Not because justice had been served, but because Thunder's sacrifice had finally been honored. The day of Thunder's memorial arrived beneath a sky strewn with gold and gray. Hundreds gathered at the city square. Police officers, veterans, families, even strangers who'd watched Ethan's tearful video and never forgotten it. A massive flag waved gently behind the podium, and at its base stood a marble plaque engraved with just 5 words: Thunder, Protector, Hero, Friend. Ryan Harlan stood beside his son, both dressed in black. Ethan held a single white rose, his small fingers trembling as he looked up at the portrait of his dog, proudly wearing his K-9 vest. The ceremony began with the sound of bagpipes. Uniformed officers saluted, their faces solemn. But as the crowd quieted, 2 figures emerged slowly from the back: Officer Harris and Officer Grant. The air shifted instantly. Murmurs rippled through the audience. They walked to the stage, eyes down, carrying a neatly folded American flag. Harris's hands shook as he approached Ryan and Ethan. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Harris knelt in front of Ethan. "This flag," he said quietly, voice trembling, "was meant to honor heroes, and we failed to see one standing right in front of us." He held the flag out to him. "I'm so sorry." Ethan looked at him, tears glistening in his wide eyes. He hesitated, then whispered, "Thunder forgave you. I think he'd want me to, too." The words hit harder than any punishment could. Harris bowed his head, his shoulders shaking as Grant placed a hand on his back. Ryan stood silently, then extended his hand. "Make sure his story is never forgotten," he said evenly. "That's how you make it right." Harris nodded, gripping his hand tightly. When they stepped away, Ethan placed the rose beside the plaque. The crowd fell silent as the flag draped across the marble, the sun breaking through the clouds above. Somewhere in that light, it almost felt like a thunder moved, a faint wag of a tail, a presence watching proudly. And for the first time, the city saw not a tragedy, but a legacy, one carved not in stone, but in the hearts of those who finally understood what true loyalty meant. The sky was painted gold and crimson. When Ryan Harlan and his son stood in their backyard, a small wooden box resting beneath the old oak tree. The air was still, heavy with the quiet kind of sorrow that lingers after justice is done. Ethan held Thunder's collar close to his chest. The metal tag caught the last rays of the sun, flashing softly like a heartbeat that refused to fade. "He liked it here," he whispered. "Under the tree. He always waited for me after school." Ryan nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He had fought wars, lost friends, faced death without flinching. But this moment broke him in a way no battlefield ever could. Together, they lowered the box into the ground. Ethan placed the collar on top, his small hands trembling. Ryan straightened, saluting with a slow, steady motion. His lips moved silently, whispering words of respect only soldiers would understand. "Rest easy, soldier," he said at last. "Mission complete." The wind stirred through the leaves, rustling like footsteps in the distance. For a fleeting second, it felt like thunder was still there, watching, guarding, faithful as ever. Ethan knelt by the mound of fresh earth, pressing a hand over it. "I'll never forget you," he said softly. His father placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to," he replied. "Heroes never really leave us. They just walk beside us where we can't see." A single flower, bright white against the dark soil, rested on the grave. The petals fluttered in the evening breeze, glimmering like a final salute from nature itself. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ryan turned toward the house, his arms still around his son. The golden light faded, leaving behind only the silhouette of the oak tree, standing tall, silent, eternal. Behind them, a faint jingle of a collar echoed once, then faded into the wind. Thunder was gone, but his presence lingered, not in the ground, but in every heartbeat that dared to protect, every soul that chose love over fear. And for the first time, Ryan Harlan allowed a tear to fall, not from pain, but from pride. A month had passed since that quiet evening beneath the oak tree. The house was calmer now. No more reporters, no more flashing lights, just the soft rhythm of healing. Still some mornings, Ethan would wake up and glance toward the porch, half expecting to see Thunder waiting there, with his tail thumping against the steps. Ryan noticed it too, the silence where paws once echoed. He tried to fill it with routine, making breakfast, walking Ethan to school, tending the flowers by Thunder's resting place. But deep down, the house felt emptier without the steady heartbeat of their loyal guardian. Then one morning, the doorbell rang. Ethan rushed to open it, barefoot and curious. On the porch sat a small crate wrapped with a blue ribbon. The tag read simply, "For Thunder's little boy, so he's never unprotected again." "From the men he saved," Ethan gasped. Inside, nestled in a soft blanket, was a German shepherd puppy, wide-eyed, clumsy, and already wagging its tail as if it knew exactly where it belonged. "Daddy!" he squealed, Look! Ryan stepped forward, stunned. He knelt beside him as the puppy nuzzled against Ethan's face, licking away the tears he didn't even realize he was shedding. "He looks just like Thunder," he whispered. Ryan smiled faintly. "Yet," he said softly, "but this one's got a fresh mission." Ethan giggled, hugging the pup close. "What's his name?" Ryan thought for a moment, then nodded towards the framed metal on the wall. "Valor," he said, "because courage should never die." From that day on, laughter returned to the Harlan home. Every morning, a small boy and a new pup walked down the same street Thunder once guarded. The same sunlight, the same path, but now with a legacy carried forward. Neighbors smiled again, waving as the echoes of tiny footsteps and playful barks filled the air. Sometimes when the wind blew just right, Ryan swore he could hear two sets of paw, one real, one remembered, moving in perfect rhythm. He'd look toward the oak tree and whisper, "You can rest now, boy. We've got it from here." Fortum. And as the screen faded to black, the narrator's voice lingered softly. Some heroes wear badges, some wear vests, and some, like Thunder, leave paw prints on the hearts they protect forever.